Let's start this huge video by first asking the most important question. What is a Lich? So, a Lich is an arcane spellcaster that has deliberately chosen to cheat death by removing their own soul from their body, and then binding it onto a receptacle called a phylactery, thereby transforming themselves into an undead being that can live on forever. But then the question is, what separates the undeadness of a Lich from the undeadness of any other undead? And that answer comes largely from the source of the animation. See, objects can be manipulated by magic very easily. You can make a broom fly, you can make a pebble launch into the air and strike at an opponent. You can enchant a golem to do all kinds of things for you, and a corpse actually works very similarly. A corpse is really just nothing more than an object when you actually think about it, once the soul no longer controls it, that is. And as such, many a wizard have developed over time spells designed to control corpses just as they have spells that control objects. Now, you do need, of course, different spells to control a corpse in the way that you would want than you would any other normal object, but that's not because the corpse is inherently different. It is because the basic kind of control that you would have over a pebble is actually kind of pathetic compared to what you actually really want. What you actually want is to be able to make the corpse grab a weapon and swing it how a person would. You want the corpse to have similar motor functions as a living being. And man, that is insanely difficult. In fact, it is so difficult that not even necromancers do that, because that's insane. Think about it from this perspective. Look at how difficult it is to create a golem in D&D. It requires legendary tier books that you have to learn, and it requires hundreds of thousands of gold pieces in rare materials for the enchantments that you need and the crafting that you would have to do. And you have to be a high-level caster for that matter to even attempt it. That is just simply how difficult it is to engineer human-like movement and control. But okay then, so then how do necromancers do it? Well, they do it by instead targeting the imprints left over behind on the corpse. One of my favorite D&D books, Libris Mortis, established that corpses retain what we call physical memory. But of course you would know this if you read more books, which is exactly why today's video is sponsored by Web Novel, one of the largest reading platforms in the entire world and the best home for serialized fiction. See, if you like Dungeons & Dragons or really just RPGs in general and have not tried RPG novels, you are missing out, my friend. We're talking fantasy novels with actual RPG mechanics like level ups and classes and rarity systems, stat screens, the whole thing. This is your genre even if you do not know it yet. And the best place to explore this is Web Novel. It doesn't just hold one of the largest volumes for serialized fantasy, but the way they handle comment sections unironically changed the way that I consume this type of content. In Web Novel, you can leave comments for specific paragraphs in a chapter, so as you're reading, you can actually see the number of people that have commented on very specific moments of the story. So like a specific character decision or a story revelation. And if you like, you can open that comment section to then see what people are saying about it. It basically adds that community component that has always been missing for me in this type of literature, like watching the comment section on a stream, you know, as the thing is happening in real time. It's just so great because it feels like you're reading it with other people, basically. And it definitely beats just having that simple comment section at the end of the chapter. But what I want to point you to, however, is others summon dragons, I summon legendary knights. This is one of my currently favorite genres, which is basically like a reverse isekai. So, like, the real world has suddenly been invaded by RPG systems. Like, you wake up one morning and you now have a class and you have stats and monsters begin to invade your world and you can gain experience by killing them, you know, that type of thing. Basically, what happens if real life just suddenly became Dungeons & Dragons. And in others summon dragons, I summon legendary knights. Earth has already been living like this for a while, and you get to experience that story from the perspective of how society has reformed now that we have lived in this RPG for a while. It's pretty cool. But yeah, if you're interested and you would like to support the channel, please download the Web Novel app on the App Store or Google Play, and please start checking it out. They do have a PC browser option, but the app is really where it is at if you want the best experience. Please use the code REX to receive 20% off on all of your purchases for 48 hours. Pretty sweet deal. Remember, code REX for 20% off for 48 hours. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel, and thank you Web Novel for sponsoring this video. And now, back to Liches. See, the muscles, tendons, and joints of a body that has walked for decades, they have what we can call worn grooves. You know, the connective tissues that has sort of shaped themselves around repeated motion throughout the life of the body. Basically, a body that has spent like 30 years walking has legs that effectively know, almost by instinct, how to walk. And well, whenever negative energy animates a corpse, it actually can follow these existing channels of least resistance. The energy doesn't need to figure out how locomotion truly works. It just needs to push, and the body's own structural memory can handle the translation into movement. This is actually why zombies move clumsily but can actually move. They are using degraded physical pathways without the fine neurological control that originally might have coordinated them in life. And so this magical technology, if you want to call it that, of course, has pros and cons. The big advantage is that you can attain control over corpses by using negative energy and have them behave roughly like a living person would, through the use of magical knowledge attainable that a normal wizard could attain in a standard lifetime. The negatives, though, is that it is only, of course, a mockery of life. It is weak and fleeting, lasting only as long as the magic runs in the corpse's body. And the biggest flaw in it being that any instruction more complex than just a generic one-word instruction is entirely lost to the animated corpse that, of course, has no true understanding of what is going on. Okay, so that last sentence, I suppose, is kind of a bit of a lie. So we know zombies. And we know that they sometimes, if not all the time, depending on the zombie, they like to do things beyond what they were created for or beyond what they have been instructed to do. We know that necromancers can sometimes, lose control. Or they merely give up that control, which of course also happens a lot. And whenever this transpires, zombies can actually go about their business. They don't need to technically be controlled to remain active, to thirst for flesh, to sometimes repeat that which they enacted in life. But then, based on what I have said before, how is this possible? Why does it happen? See, this is where we have to delve deep into what exactly these necromantic spells actually use to achieve these goals. This is where we have to go deep into talking about the negative energy plane. So the negative energy plane is one of the two energy planes that exist in D&D, the most fundamental layers of reality in the D&D cosmology. You can think of them as like the batteries of the multiverse. They provide the raw fuel that makes things, happen everywhere else. The positive energy plane is the source of life, growth, vitality, and creation. Every living cell in every creature on every material plane draws its spark from this plane. Healing magic channels it. The sun radiates an echo of it. It is the source and the force that makes things exist. And then the negative energy plane is the source of entropy, of decay, of the unmaking, of cessation. It is a force that makes things stop existing. Now, these two planes are not good and evil. They're not even really opposites of each other in a moral sense. They are more akin to, thermodynamic poles. And to make life actually function, you require both. A world of pure positive energy would be a cancerous explosion of growth without form. A world of pure negative energy would be absolute void. And so the material plane, and again, all life on it, exist in the very specific tension that happens between these two energies. In D&D Metaphysics, every living creature is animated by a life force, sometimes called the vital spark, sometimes the animus. This is, by the way, not the soul. The soul is the seat of identity, of consciousness, memory, and of moral character. The life force is something more basic. It is the energy that makes the biological processes in life run. It is the difference between a living cell and a dead cell. Both would have the same physical components, but one is doing things while the other is not. See, the life force originates from the positive energy plane. Every living creature is, in a sense, a tiny channel through which positive energy flows from the plane into the material world. The heart beats because positive energy animates the muscle. The brain fires because positive energy sustains the electrochemistry. When a creature dies of natural causes, that channel closes. The life force completely withdraws, and the positive energy connection between the two is severed, and the biological machinery simply winds down and stops. Healing spells like Cure Wound work by opening that channel wider, flooding the body with additional positive energy, which again accelerates repair and regeneration. This is why healing spells don't really work on the undead, or in many editions it actually damages them, because you are effectively pouring positive energy into a system that is now running on negative energy, and both attack each other. But yes, undead use the negative energy plane instead of the positive, but we will get there. Now, when negative energy contacts a living creature, so what happens is, it begins to siphon the life force. It pulls the positive energy out of the creature's body. Mechanically, this is why necrotic damage is designed sometimes to reduce your maximum hit points, because hit points in D&D are, in part, an abstraction of what we're calling here vital energy, and negative energy is draining that vital energy directly. Spells like Inflict Wounds, and Blight, and Circle of Death all operate similarly on this principle. They channel negative energy onto a target, overwhelming the positive energy-based life force that sustains it. The body doesn't necessarily show massive physical trauma, but the vital spark is being snuffed. Now, this is one of the most critical discoveries that you can make if you're like a wizard wishing to do, tee things with corpses, because this is always the aha moment that allows wizards to realize that, hey, I can animate the dead by simply pouring the corpses with negative energy. Because see, the process by which the negative energy plane destroys life is not by simply making it disappear. It instead converts it and then inverts it. When life flourishes, as you can imagine, it produces more life. The very nature of what life is when it expands is that it produces more of it. As such, the opposite has to be true for unlife. When unlife flourishes, it should expand the way by which it unmakes life, if it wanted to actually be equal but opposite to the positive energy. And so, whereas the positive energy plane makes those it touches virile and fertile, the negative energy plane makes those that it touches conduits to further destroy life. When negative energy completely replaces the life force in a body, rather than to make the body simply stop functioning, it begins to make it function in reverse. The pattern of the living creature, the way that the muscles connect, the way that the joints articulate, the way that the neural pathways were wired, that pattern stays the same, but instead of being powered by the positive energy, it is now powered by the negative energy. When a living creature's muscles contract because positive energy drives that chemistry, a zombie's muscles contract because the negative energy forces that tissue, literally grabs it and forces it to move along any existing structural pathways. Positive energy constructs structures in order to grant movement and control, whereas negative energy, you could say, imitates what already exists for that movement and control. Positive does what it does to build, while negative does what it does to destroy. A good example of this is how living creatures sense the world around them. They do so by nerve impulses carrying signals into their brain, while an undead senses the world around them through the awareness of existing positive energy. They can effectively feel the life force of other living creatures in the same way as you and I would feel heat radiating from a fire. And it is designed in that way because the entire purpose of negative energy is to destroy positive energy. It has to do this, and it does so instinctually, involuntarily, and simply because it is what it is. This is why undead are drawn to attack the living, because the very concept of entropy has been given onto this body, which it now controls, and will instinctually seek to fulfill its purpose. But in short, this is basically the functional difference between a living body and an undead body. One using the positive energy plane while the other uses the negative. And then the specific kind of undead that we are talking about, of course, differs in how or which parts of its being is manipulated by which energy. Now, remember, there are three main components to a creature. You have the body, you have the life force, and you have the soul. And so far, we have really only talked about the body and the life force, but what about the soul? So, the soul is the consciousness, the thing that looks through the eyes and knows that it is looking. It is the identity, the memories, the personality, and just the morality of the creature. The problem with the soul, though, is that it is vulnerable. It is a very fragile thing. It is powerful, but fragile. By its very nature, it is a source of power and energy. Souls are designed to be able to transcend existence, after all. To move between planar realities and to exist forever while still maintaining their identities, their knowledge, their acquired wisdom, and their strength. And this accumulated source of impetus, like kinetic energy, but in the form of potential and knowledge, it is all stored infinitely inside of this malleable core of the soul. And this can be exploited, it can be taken, and it can be used by others. A creature that knows how to tap into this power can abuse a soul that it finds. It can extirpate all of these qualities and then leaving that soul dry and husked. And this is why a soul must be protected, and it's actually why the body exists. Without a body, a soul is like a sponge, readily absorbing things around it, easily grabbed and used. Normally, a soul without a body would simply be called by the powers of the great beyond to take it onto an afterlife. Though abnormally, for one reason or another, a soul could stay behind even without a body, and if it does so, it usually changes into something probably bad, or is taken by someone else or something else. But all of these options are awful for a powerful wizard who might wish to retain his autonomy. And so simply finding a way to remove your soul from your decaying old body is really not that simple, and it would not solve your problem. So how do you stop your soul from leaving your body after you die? Well, see, it is the animus, the life force, that actually binds the soul to the body. In other words, it is the positive or the negative energy, whichever you possess within you, that does this very important binding of the body and the soul. Now, when you die, which normally it is because your body is not able to sustain your animus anymore, and so the animus basically leaves your body back into the plane where it comes from, and when that happens, the animus is no longer in your body, so it can no longer bind your soul, and that's again why your soul would detach from your body and presumably go into the afterlife. But this is actually the biggest problem, the fact that the soul automatically detaches from your body the second that the animus leaves your body. That is what has caused every single person seeking immortality so much trouble. See, you actually really want to have a body. You really, really do. You don't want to be just a soul just floating in the ether. But bodies are tricky. They are vulnerable. They grow old. They get sick. You know, they're generally kind of terrible when you really think about it, at least from the perspective of a wizard that wants to obtain immortality. But there are ways around it so that you can have your cake and eat it. Let's explore a few possibilities. So, artificial bodies, like those of a metal golem. Those can actually work, and you can indeed plant your soul into one of them. But the problem is that metal and magic don't really go well together, especially arcane magic, and we already know this. This is a standard D&D trope that wizards have generally a hard time casting spells when they have armor on themselves. And so if you have a fully artificial body, you can effectively say goodbye to your spellcasting for the most part, which is horrible to think about if, something goes wrong in the implantation of the soul, because then you would have no way to use your own magic to reverse it. Plus, it is stated that if your soul is ever implanted onto a vessel that does not possess the general qualities of the body that it is used to, it goes mad. For example, if you were to put your soul onto a vessel that doesn't have legs or a way to sense or feel things around, you would basically go mad. But there are also other options. So beyond artificial bodies, you can indeed literally shape your soul into a body so that, for example, your soul actually hardens into the shape of a body. Thereby, rather than inhabiting something different, you just develop your own protection, your own ability to, interact with the world and to resist outside forces without having those very weak flesh and blood bodies that just wither and die. But to accomplish this, you do have to invite a different kind of force into you. You have to use something that is neither positive nor negative energy. And of course, the issue is that with every force, there is always a bias, and there are always positives and negatives. The act of transforming your very soul itself into a form is actually that which naturally happens to any soul when they go into the afterlife. This is what happens when you turn into a demon or into an angel, into a Modron, or even into a god. For example, this is what happens when you go into the lower planes and you end up turning into a lemure. It is actually your very soul that is taking on to the shape of this new creature that you now are. But, this is not really what you want either. Because if you're seeking to remain independent from being controlled by, the forces of the multiverse, you're going to end up just inevitably becoming subservient to that which has transformed you into this new shape. If you allow the indelible power of law to shape your soul into a body, you'll be therefore forever subservient to law. Just how it changed your body, it will change you, your personality, your character, your desires. It will entirely change you into something entirely different, into something that you might not even want to call yourself anymore, because your soul is you. To change your soul is to change you. So, in other words, you also do not want to change your soul. So, okay. Artificial bodies are a big no-no, and changing your soul into a body is also a big no-no. So then what do? Well, the short, unsatisfying answer is that there is no perfect solution. But the good news is that there are less than perfect solutions that are still pretty good. If you're okay with negative energy, of course. See, you could live forever if you had negative energy running inside of you rather than positive energy. As we described, negative energy destroys the living infrastructure of a body and effectively replaces it, and it can be used to effectively run a body as if it was alive with the proper spell. However, there are two problems, because nothing is ever easy. So the first problem is you would have to find a way to prevent your soul from leaving the body as soon as it runs out of positive energy, so that the newly incoming negative energy could bind your soul into the body. The second problem is that the negative energy comes with a lot of baggage and a lot of biases and instinctual, let's say, demands that it's going to ask of you, like needing to sometimes feed upon others, for example, like a vampire. So really, you would want to find a way to ideally protect your soul from these demands, while still having you run your own body and the negative energy that sustains it. Now, the issue with the second problem is actually what happens to vampires and death knights. They found a way to slowly replace the positive energy that runs inside of them with negative energy, such as to allow their souls to remain bound with the last ounce of positive energy finally leaves their body. But then, they do end up being a prisoner of their own urges. Now, they can fight it, of course. If their willpower is strong enough, you can more than likely remain yourself, and eventually, over time, as you gain mastery over the influence, you may be able to even entirely ignore it. I mean, look at what happens to vampires when they reach thousands of years of age. They become so good at understanding and controlling the negative energy within them that they can enact all of the positives of such a force and ignore all of the negatives. These vampires suffer no ill from the sun and sometimes don't even need to feed anymore. But there is a negative that they will never be able to ignore, and that is that forevermore your soul and the negative energy in the body will become entwined, such as if the negative energy in the body is destroyed, your soul will likely also be destroyed. Your soul also becomes entwined with the restrictions normally associated with negative energy, such as becoming unable to interact with positive energy in a non-destructive way. For example, neither a vampire nor a death knight can ever use positive energy in their magics. Death knights famously lose their ability to heal through their use of lay on hands. These are just examples of extremely detrimental features that, if you want to become immortal, you would want to avoid. But how do you even protect your soul from the influence of the negative energy while having that energy sustain the very body that you control? Well, it turns out that the answer is actually rather simple, but, as you can imagine, extraordinarily complicated to enact. You do not house your soul in the body. You instead create an artifact within which your soul is stored, which serves as nothing more than a link between your soul and the body. Your soul would thereby be protected from outside influence, including that of the negative energy that sustains your body, while you still would control and use the senses of your body. Now, the magical technology for this already exists. In fact, we see magic like this used all the time. Spells like Find Familiar and Beast Sense allows you to use some of the senses of another creature. Spells like Dominate Monster can give you absolute control over the muscles of a creature. There are countless spells like Magic Mouth that allow you to produce speech that sounds exactly like you and have it emanate from any location of your choice. If there is something that can be done as a single spell, then you can surmise that through enough magical experimentation, you can create spells with more complicated, deeper versions of those effects. Case in point, the spell Magic Jar, which is actually one of the foundational spells of the Lich. The spell Magic Jar allows you to disjoint your soul completely from your body and then implant it upon a carefully crafted object. By doing so, the spell effectively grants you the ability to gain a form of control over your soul, allowing you to push it outside of a body and into another or into the special vessel that you have created. You cannot have your soul roam free, of course, because generally speaking, nothing can truly withstand the pull that all souls suffer from, the great beyond when they don't have the protection of a body. But the spell does allow for the very small window of time that it would need to hop from cover to cover, so to speak, from body to body. Anyhow, the specially crafted object that you would have to craft would allow you to sense beyond it. It would give you the ability to also forcefully eject a creature's soul from their body so that then you can replace it and assume possession of that body while keeping the victim's soul entrapped in the container. Now, I say that this spell holds the core fundamentals of what it means to be a Lich, even though it is not fully there yet, because it has the most important principles that you must have to succeed in this endeavor. It allows for, 1, the creation of an object that can safely contain a soul. 2, it allows such a soul to enact its will beyond it. 3, it allows you to enchant an object with the magic required to automatically recall your soul in the event that a body perishes with you in it. And these are very, very important factors, but most important of all, 4, the spell is permanent. It does not require you to constantly reapply it, and that part, of course, is huge. But this only solves one of the 2 major problems that we discussed before. You still have to figure out what to do in regards to attenuating your body with negative energy. Plus, you want to be able to fully control the input of that energy into the body, such as to allow you to control the body as if it was your own, rather than to have the negative energy control it for you. You also don't want the negative energy to rot your body fully, at least not to the speed that it does to, say zombies. There are still many problems, but those are almost all solved by the actual real secret of lichdom. Any competent wizard understands what negative energy does, and any erudite, given enough time and resources, will learn and develop the ability to cast the Magic Jar spell. But these are not the real impediments to lichdom. Lichdom is only ever obtained by like 1% of the 1%. What you have to do, and this is the hard part, is to make your soul sympathetic to negative energy, to have your soul, metaphorically speaking, beat in the same frequency as negative energy. Now, you don't want to simply flood your soul with negative energy, as we mentioned before. You don't really want it to forcefully change your soul, and that's what it would do. That would be the easy way to do it, but that's how you get creatures with no control over their personalities, with cravings that they cannot remove. And that's what makes this difficult. You have to sort of learn to be one with it. You have to understand negative energy. You have to vibe with it, feel it, understand what it wants, what it needs, its limitations, its grasp. In more, practical, literal terms, you need to do 2 things. You need to commit acts while alive that are horrifically anathema to positive energy. But, of course, acts that are perfectly on brand with negative energy. The sort of actions that figuratively, and in this case maybe even literally, scar your soul. Then you must allow your soul to embrace a safe amount of negative energy, enough to bond and attune with it, but not enough to kill you or mutate you. This is the secret, and this is what is actually difficult. And to accomplish this, you perform a ritual that allows for the creation of the dreaded lichnee potion. This is the secret. This is what wizards spend their entire lives searching for. When people ask, what is the secret to lichdom? The answer is the lichnee potion. Now, I will give you guys the exact formula for the most wanted and the most sought after potion in the entirety of Dungeons and Dragons. The potion that turns you into a lich. The potion has 9 ingredients and they are as follows. 2 pinches of pure arsenic, 1 pinch of belladonna, 1 measure of fresh face spider venom, 1 measure of fresh wyvern venom, blood from a humanoid infant killed by a face spider, blood of a humanoid infant killed by a combination of arsenic and belladonna, the heart of a virgin humanoid killed by wyvern venom, 1 quart of vampire blood, and the grounded reproductive glands of 7 giant moths. See, this is what I call a proper hag potion. It is effectively a combination of genuine natural effects combined with the magical properties of harvestable materials and a little bit of symbolism that puts it all together. But now, let's go through it one by one and explain exactly how this is meant to work. So arsenic is of course known as the king of poisons and the poison of kings. It is odorless, tasteless, relatively accessible poison that kills subtly and over time. But that is actually not the reason for its inclusion. Arsenic more commonly is used as a preservative. It kills bacteria, fungi, and virtually every microorganism responsible for decomposition. Corpses with high concentrations of arsenic resist decay for centuries. You can actually make embalming fluids out of arsenic because it can effectively mummify a body when thoroughly applied and have them last for centuries. See, this is what allows the Lich's body to not rot. It withers, of course, and desiccates, but does not decompose. Arsenic, ingested through the carefully crafted potion, would saturate every tissue, every single cell of your body, making sure that that body would last for thousands of years after death. Then we have belladonna, and this one is really cool. The scientific name is Atropa belladonna. The name, of course, comes from Atropos, one of the 3 fates in Greek mythology, specifically the one that cuts the thread of life. The common name, which we would all recognize, is the famous deadly nightshade. When consumed, belladonna allows one to experience complete dissociation from their body, a feeling of flying away from the grounded reality, to see worlds unlike your own, to effectively detach your spirit from the vessel it occupies, even if only momentarily. This herb is basically the catalyst that allows the Lich's soul the freedom to detach from the body, to move it, but perhaps more importantly, to be able to feel that movement and to experience what you see while you are moving your soul. A very important component. But now, the usage of wyvern venom is a bit tricky because the thematic purpose for this poison has actually shifted throughout the editions, and so the reasons for its inclusion back when the formula for the potion was created might actually no longer apply. But to explain, wyvern poison was the poison. For the longest time in Dungeons & Dragons, it was effectively considered to be simply just the most powerful natural poison in the world. If a wyvern pricked you with the stinger, you would do a save, and then if you were to fail that save, you would die. Period. That was it. There was no damage associated with the poison. Since those old days, wyvern poison has now been since modified to deal a tremendous amount of damage instead. Definitely enough to kill most people anyways, so that has not changed, but what has changed are the implications of what the poison actually does. If you were to drink a poison, and that poison would make you take a bunch of damage, there would be this understanding that the poison would be, breaking all kinds of havoc inside of your body. Like it would be literally breaking down your body, your organs inside until you die. At least that would be the implication. But if you drink a poison that simply and just instantly kills you with no damage, visible or otherwise, there would be this different, opposite implication. That the poison maybe is just like stopping your heart, or is performing any other number of things that would produce a type of death that might not actually damage your internal organs. But why would this matter? Well, this matters because the Lich does not want to destroy his own body. Of course, the Lich needs his body. He does not want his organs to be damaged, but he does need to die. Dying is part of the transition between being mortal and becoming a lich. Further, he wants to die at a very specific time for the ritual to actually work. He needs the poison to kill him at a specific and precise moment so that all of the magical effects take place exactly when they need to. Also, the would-be lich wants to avoid accidentally resisting the effects of the poison, or I guess tanking the damage, so to speak. So again, ideally, the poison would just kill him easily and effectively with no side damage to the body. So based on how the rules of D&D have changed and how wyvern poison kills creatures now, this particular ingredient would likely have to be amended to instead include maybe a different kind of poison, one that would simply kill you without any damage. But I digress. Now, the phase spider venom, though it used to have a similar quality to the wyvern venom in that it also sort of just killed you, the actual importance for its inclusion is a bit different than that for the wyvern venom. And now, be mindful that what I'm about to say here is largely just my interpretation, because its actual function has not been officially stated, but my understanding for the phase spider venom is probably partially symbolic. Or perhaps there is a feature to the venom that is left unsaid, but since the idea is for the soul of the lich to be able to adapt and embrace, even if partially, the negative energy, then adding a quality onto the lichnee potion that relates to the ethereal realm would make sense. Whether it would be to ease the ability for the soul to move between realities, or to better gaze upon the ethereal plane, or even perhaps to gaze into or to travel into the negative energy plane, I am not sure. But it does suffice to say that in the book Van Richten's Guide to Liches, which I should clarify is not strictly canon for the Forgotten Realms, but it is still worth discussing, they do mention that the bonding between the soul and the negative energy plane happens during the moment in which the soul is free from the body, and there is an almost like an allusion to the soul being able to like travel or pass through at least part of the negative energy plane for a very small amount of time before it makes it onto the phylactery for the very first time. So I do believe, whichever the answer is, that this is likely the reason for this particular type of venom. But moving on, now for the final ingredients, the blood of a vampire is largely used to represent the framework by which the body of the lich will utilize the powers of the negative energy, kind of like a proof of concept. See, when magic is unleashed, it uses a lot of the intent of the caster in how it functions. It uses the emotions, the thoughts, the drive of the caster. It uses what the caster is looking at. Like all of these things are taken into consideration in one way or another. And so when you have a powerful magical concoction that is to trigger like a lot of different events, having a specific kind of framework, structure, or system that already contains what you would deem to be an acceptable combination of biology and negative energy that is designed to basically help the ritual properly settle into what it is supposed to do. And on the same boat, you have the reproductive glands of a moth. Now this one really does stand out by far as the weirdest ingredient, but that is because this is largely a symbolic ingredient. This is the type of ingredient that a hag potion would have, because it is not necessarily what effects it produces as much as it is what the ingredient stands for. And the thing about moths that is important in this context is their capacity for metamorphosis, which is the ability to fully transform from one form onto another, as the lich will have to not just imbue its corpse with enchantments and negative energy, but the corpse itself has to change, like dramatically at a fundamental level, into something that is very, very different. For all intents and purposes, the lich will perform a metamorphosis on his own body. And so, again, the framework is there for the spell to understand what is supposed to happen. And then, to close up the potion, you have, of course, the darkest parts of the ritual. It's not just that you need to gather all of these previously discussed reagents, it's that you also are required to kill. The list includes the death of 2 different infants, from which you are expected to extract blood from. One of which is done through phase spider venom and the other through belladonna and arsenic. It is dark, because death through belladonna and arsenic is not particularly quick. Of course, it gets even darker when you remember that the blood of these children does have to go into the potion, which you will then be drinking. Now, my interpretation for why this is necessary, which again is just my interpretation, but it is twofold. On one hand, you're effectively doing this as a way to sort of bond your soul to the negative energy. You're committing the types of acts that will scar your soul forever, which is necessary. It is in fact the reason why the transformation into a lich is considered to be an evil act, because it simply requires things like this. Now, the other reason is partly the same as that of the vampire blood. It is a proof of concept. By having the blood of a creature that was killed by these ingredients, you're telling the universe, the magic, that this is the proof of concept that these poisons can and should kill you. Such that when you actually do drink the potion with those poisons, they will, certainly, hopefully, kill you. The idea is that the symbolism will make the poison stronger by testing it and using the proof of its efficacy in the magic itself. Now, there is also a third interpretation which sees children as sort of like the epitome, I guess, of life, the very abstracted core of what creation is. And so by killing that and using its remains as part of the ritual, it is basically designed to further reject positive energy from your body and then, welcome the opposite energy in. But anyways, the final part of the ritual is the heart of a virgin humanoid killed by wyvern venom. The idea here is that you need a relatively intact heart for the ritual, and wyvern venom, in theory, would cause a person to die without necessarily harming their organs, as we discussed before. So the heart would not be damaged, but that is also, again, just an interpretation. The important thing, though, is that the heart has to come from a creature that has not borne life, a virgin, which is, of course, yet another symbolic rejection of positive energy. But further, the heart has an interesting property in that it sort of grants the energy, the lifeblood, the lasting potential of this ritual. In fact, depending on the type of lich, depending on exactly what ritual you use or how you design your phylactery, some liches actually have to consistently sacrifice the hearts of virgins every 100 years in order to retain the great powers that they wield on their lich-like corpse that they inhabit. Whenever you see a lich that is able to completely reconstitute their body if it is destroyed, just to gain a new body, this is the ritual that they basically have to do every 100 years to allow for that to happen. But I digress. This is how you create the lichnee potion, which you are expected to drink at night under the light of the full moon. And when you do so, the potion will kill you. It will extirpate your body from positive energy and fill it with negative energy. Then detach your soul and bond it onto the phylactery, while also creating a powerful link between the phylactery itself and your corpse. Your soul would then be forced to remain within the phylactery for approximately 3 days, largely just resting and acclimating to the new vessel. After that, you would be able to, for the first time, push your soul back into your corpse, which would now be a true lich body. But when you do so, you will be left effectively helpless for an entire week. The process of, sort of learning how to possess the corpse and use it as a body to acclimate yourself to the new energies associated with it, that just takes time. And during this time, again a week, you cannot fight, you cannot cast spells, you can barely even move. It is stated that this is the most vulnerable moment that a lich ever has. But this is it. After this week, provided that you're able to survive this one singular week in which you literally cannot do anything, the lich will never again be weak. It will never again be vulnerable, and will forevermore, until the end of time, be immortal and all-powerful. Now, the reason why you might see liches that behave differently, that have different abilities, different features, that might have different requirements, it's because there is technically one extra step that can be taken which will further define the kind of transformation that your corpse will go through before it transforms into a full lich. This is done by enchanting spells directly into the lichnee potion before you drink it. Now, traditionally, the spells enchanted are usually Animate Dead, Feign Death, Cone of Cold, Wraith Form, and Permanency. But it is very likely that powerful liches will have their own specific combinations of spells that they have used and developed for their own peculiar transformation, a combination that they will likely keep secret. But if you ever wondered why some liches might have, kooky, specific, unique properties, it is very likely that this is how they got them, by using a different collection of spells to fuel the type of lich that they wanted to become. So then, now that everything is said and done, and the lich has been made, how does it really function? How is the immortality that was so easily coveted truly work? See, one of the most important features granted to the lich by the ritual is the ability to recreate the body if it is ever destroyed. So if you kill a lich, it is never truly just dead, because its soul will simply return back to the phylactery and, over time, the body will be reformed. However, exactly how that works differs depending on, sometimes, the type of Lich, and sometimes even the edition of D&D. In 3rd and 5th edition, so the most concurrent versions of the game, because 4th edition doesn't exist, it just assumed that the body reforms automatically in the span of a few days. But what the entries in the monster manual don't tell you in those editions is that there are restrictions, and oftentimes rituals, that have to be maintained in order for that to happen. For example, as I mentioned before, the ritual of sacrificing a maiden every 100 years in order to obtain their heart, with which to empower the magics that sustain you. The actual specific rituals would be likely also unique to each and every Lich. Generally speaking, the main rule though is that the Lich's corpse has to be within a specific range of the phylactery. So the phylactery can reform or heal the body and then push the Lich's soul back into it, but only if it is within this very specific range. Again, some Liches might be able to break this restriction with specific spells or specific rituals, but this is the core baseline for what all Liches generally can do and then build upon. So what happens then if the body, the corpse, is not within reach of the phylactery and it is destroyed? Well, the soul of the Lich within the phylactery can instead possess a different body that is within reach. It is stated that the body can literally be anything, as long as it is a corpse and it has been dead for no longer than 30 days. I mean, this could be a random person, this could be the corpse of a dog, the corpse of a rat, literally anything. However, when the Lich's soul possesses such a body, it does not gain any of the usual benefits or powers that the Lich normally would have access to. Instead, they become a much weaker version of their usual self, retaining usually only their intelligence and their wisdom in the new body. They can't even cast spells unless the corpse that they're inhabiting already was able to cast spells. The lore describes the transformation that the corpse undertakes with this possession as something more akin to a wight, which is really just meant to be a momentary transformation, hopefully. The goal for the Lich, when it envelops this transformation, would be to find its actual real corpse and then bring it within range of its phylactery so that it can properly restore it back to functionality. Now, what is really cool is that, as we established before, there is a powerful link between the soul of the Lich and the corpse body of the Lich. And what this allows is for the Lich to always be able to tell where its body is. So it always knows where it has to go in order to get it back. In fact, this power is so strong that even if the body is torn and butchered into a million pieces, the Lich has the ability to know where each and every piece of the body is located. Even if the body is burned literally to ash, the Lich can just tell where each grain is located. And the wildest part is that all that the Lich has to do is bring the body back within range of the phylactery. It doesn't literally matter the state that the body is in, just that it is within range. So if the body was fully cremated and then the ashes were spread around a particular location, so long as the range of the phylactery could encompass that entire location, all the Lich would have to do is bring the phylactery to where the ashes are in order to fully reform the body. Another really cool thing that it could do, which is even crazier, is that the Lich can actually eat the remains of its own corpse. By doing so, going and finding and then eating each and every part of its corpse body, it could effectively collect the whole of the corpse into its stomach, and then simply walk back into the range of its phylactery in order to reform the body. It's crazy. The only caveat that we're given is that if the body is subjected to the effects of a disintegrate spell, then there is definitely no coming back from that. The body is effectively obliviated out of existence, and the only thing that the Lich can do at that point to ever get it back would be to, I don't know, do like a wish spell or something like that. Otherwise, he's basically screwed. But in that case, the Lich would be effectively locked into never having its actual real Lich body back, and would be forced to rely on weaker corpses to inhabit, which would be a big shame. But now, first edition did have some more harsher restrictions that the Lich would have to keep in mind. But largely, these would not be fully adapted into the following editions as far as I can tell. One of those is that if you killed the Lich would actually permanently die if it still had its soul in that body as it died. So basically, the Lich had to eject its own soul into the phylactery before it died. If it knew, of course, that it was gonna die. In addition, every single time that the Lich was forced to project its life force back into the phylactery, it would actually weaken it permanently. The Lich would effectively lose a level each and every time, and if its level ever went below 10th level, then the next death that the Lich would suffer would be permanent. But again, it doesn't seem like any of these things ever made it past 1st edition. Now, beyond all of this, of course, if you ever destroyed the phylactery and then destroyed the Lich in its body, the Lich would always die, regardless of which Lich it is and what edition we're talking about. That has always been fundamentally the primary way to kill a Lich, and it is what most Lich hunters would know, of course. That killing a Lich is generally fruitless unless you can find and destroy the phylactery, either before you kill the Lich or after you kill it, but before it regenerates the new body. Also, the process of regenerating a body always takes about a week. So there is usually time to find a phylactery to permanently kill the Lich if you ever are able to defeat one in combat. And this brings us finally to the question that looms at the end of every discussion about Liches. What happens when a Lich has been alive for so long that it simply has no more use for its body? What happens when a Lich has learned everything its world can teach it, conquered everything worth conquering, explored every plane, mastered every spell, and found that even the endless pursuit of power has grown stale? What happens when a Lich, after millennia of existence, simply stops caring about the physical world entirely? And well, you probably saw this coming, but the answer is the demilich. And the demilich is a creature so far beyond what we have discussed today that it frankly deserves its own video. Because this one is already, I'm seeing my recording and it says an hour long, so it's already way too long. But what I will tell you is this: the demilich is not supposed to be a weakened Lich. It is not a Lich that failed in something. It is not a Lich that simply forgot to perform some ritual or that ran out of power. The demilich is supposed to be a Lich that has, quote, literally achieved a new level of existence, end quote. It is a Lich that has grown so powerful, so knowledgeable, so utterly disinterested in the material world that it voluntarily surrenders its physical form. Its body crumbles to useless dust, and all that remains is but a skull housing a consciousness so vast, so ancient, and so alien that it makes the Lich look like simply an apprentice who just learned their first cantrip. But that, again, a story for another time, because this is way too long. Thank you all so much for watching. Please remember to check out Webnovel and use my code REX to get that sweet discount. The link is in the description. Once again, thank you so much Webnovel for sponsoring this video. Also, as always, we have a packet for our Patreon supporters to complement this video, so if you want a PDF with the written mechanics of the things that we talked about today, with cool art and all of the rest, make sure to support me on Patreon. Link in the description. And we also have a full 50% off on the last of my Sands of Doom hardcover adventure books, so get yours on my website before it is too late. All of the links in the description. Thank you all so much once again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.